Yes, which was pretty awesome. Some of them were
off the top of my head. Compared.
You are now listening to the Voices of Dubai.
You're listening
Watching the Voices of Dubai with Joe Hage.
This is the Voices of Dubai.
Danielle, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for inviting me on.
I remember the first time we met was in 2017, late 2017, early 2018. I was working at Mango Jam Studios as their creative audio producer, and you were selected by one of their clients as the English voice actress for the Louvre Museum.
Yeah.
We were recording a series of podcasts by then. Yeah. So I had the pleasure to meet you, and since then, and throughout the years, we have worked together on so many different projects.
Yeah, that's right. And we've actually voiced projects together as well.
Yeah, we did.
We have. I think it was a while ago now. I think it was Jeep.
Oh, yes. Yes, that was in 2018, 2019.
Something like that, yeah.
So I was working at Soundstruck Studios by then.
That's right, you'd moved over.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Danielle, you're a film director, voiceover actress, entrepreneur, mother of two.
Yep.
How do you manage your time in a way to make sure that you're productive in all these different areas of your life?
It's super tricky since having children, your time is not your own. So still wanting to keep all the balls up in the air has been really tricky. At the moment, the hardest thing is finding a quiet time to record at home. You know, everybody's willing to do remote recordings, which is great, saves you the drive into the studio. But for me, it's really nerve-wracking because I'm really worried that I'll be in the middle of like a really poignant moment with the client live in a session, and then my toddler will kick off right outside the door, "Mama!" Ruin the whole illusion of me being professional.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest challenge, kind of finding, because we're working from home so much, it's really hard to separate your brains while you're at home. So I'm often saying, are you sure you don't want me to drive into the studio? I'm really happy to come in. So yeah, that's the biggest challenge. But I think you have to be kind to yourself when you feel like you haven't achieved anything that day, or when you feel like you have so much more that you want to do, and then you reach the end of the day and you're just spent. So I think the biggest thing I've learned about managing my time is managing my expectations about what I can achieve every day. And some days, I feel like it's incredible. I'm able to, work on, a piece that I'm directing and do a voiceover spot and, feed my children and all those other things that happen at home, So sometimes it works really well, but other days you just sort of think, okay, well, I have to put that on hold today, and that's okay. And, tomorrow's another day, and I'm not saving the world. I'm doing what I love, which I'm very fortunate to be able to do as a freelancer. So, yes. Just take it as it comes.
That's awesome. How did you get started in the voiceover industry?
Look, it's super easy, and I've helped a lot of people get started in the voiceover industry. You get a demo, you record it, you put it down, you send it to studios. It's that simple. So the way I started is I literally Googled 30-second radio spots and chose 3 or 4 that were contrasting. And I would suggest you look for ones that suit your voice. So think of a brand that would suit your voice and either write a script, kind of compile a script that would work for that brand, or find an existing script from that brand. And I think I recorded it on my phone, and I put it into GarageBand and put some sound design on it.
There we go.
Yeah, it's that easy, because these demos don't need to be professionally done. What they want to hear is your voice. They don't really mind how it's put together. But obviously, if you put a little bit of sound design and help the imagination along as to what your voice could sound like in the final product, then you're in with a really good shot. And then a friend of mine took me down to Mango Jam, and I sat with Wilbur and said hi, and he was kind enough to explain to me how the pricing would work and what I could, how I could sort of charge for my time and where I would be most valuable. So I'm Australian, but I work in an American accent 90% of the time, because unfortunately nobody wants my accent. Well, most of the time they don't. So he was really great in sort of like guiding me as to what would be most valuable. And I thought that I would do a lot more British. But actually there are lots of fantastic British voiceover artists here, and there are not as many Americans. So I ended up working in American because I get a lot more work that way. There's less competition. So and then those first few sessions were obviously a little nerve-wracking, and I thought that I'd have to be super prepared. But once you've done it a couple of times, it's great. You go in, you improvise,
Can you recall a session that was challenging or difficult, in the sense that you walked in and You had this imposter syndrome. Did you ever get that walking into a recording session?
Imposter syndrome, no. I've had that in other aspects of life. I know what that feels like.
Okay.
But with voiceover work, I used to be an actor, and
Okay.
I trained quite extensively. So I never felt like I shouldn't have been in the room, kind of putting voice to character or empathizing with a character and giving a voice to that. That felt very natural.
Okay.
But there have been moments where I've really kind of come into my self-esteem has been really called into question because I've thought that I've been doing a really great job and really put my whole heart into it, and the client didn't like what I was doing, and that can be really frustrating because I think the biggest challenge is interpreting clients' feedback. And I think all voiceover artists, I mean, we talk about this when voiceover artists get together. Of course, we talk about, what the feedback is that we're getting and how to work with that. And I remember one session, I went in and it was a really emotional session, and it was for a non-profit, and I was telling a story about somebody who had gone through extensive hardship, like really, really severe hardship. And this organization had helped them, so I was the voice of the person that they'd helped. And we did the session, and it was a really long script, and it was really detailed about this woman's experiences, and I could really visualize everything that was in that script. And I felt like when I was describing it as though it was really my experience. And the client kept saying, this is not emotional enough. We think you're reading. We can hear you reading the script. And the way they were giving the feedback was really cutting. So I kept getting a little bit more, really? Because I'm visualizing everything that I'm reading. And I was thinking, what more can I do to make this emotional apart from wailing in the middle of it? What can I do to express the emotion that I'm genuinely feeling at this point? And I just couldn't work it out. And in the end, they actually cut the session short and they didn't use my voice.
Wow. Did you get paid for that?
No.
Wow.
And it was already very discounted. I mean, it was for a not-for-profit organization, so I was already, really happy to contribute and to do something at a very, very discounted rate. But then the session was so confronting. And I said to the studio afterwards, I was like, you were listening to that session. Was I not taking their feedback? I really started to doubt myself, What had I done wrong? What could I have done better? And they were like, no, they've been quite difficult with other voiceover artists. They have something in mind, and they've actually, not used 2 other voices for the same spot.
Wow.
I wish I'd gotten that kind of warning ahead of time.
Ahead of time, of course.
Yeah, because what I find is now, as a result of that experience, when I go into a session, I immediately take charge of the session. And when I come in on the front foot, it puts everybody else at ease that they're in safe hands with me, so that the client is thinking, okay, she knows what she's doing, we can trust her, rather than coming in very gentle and what would you like today, and let me know. I come in
getting stepped on. Totally. Yeah.
It felt like that. It felt like that because it felt like I couldn't do my job. And I mean, I've been doing this a long time, you've been doing this a long time. The job is interpreting the feedback, but if the feedback just keeps coming at you, the exact same feedback, and you're trying different things and it's the same word coming at you, it's really frustrating, because how can I make something more emotional? I've tried, and so this is what I go in and do now. I try and break it down. So you get the feedback, make it more emotional. And I've tried 2 or 3 different delivery styles that I think is emotional, and it's not worked. So then I'll break it down. I'll say, okay, what you're hearing in your mind, I need to try and figure it out. Let me try and get there for you. So let's break it down. Is the tempo right? Is it too fast? Is it too slow? Are we good there? Okay, fine. What about the pitch? Do you want like a deeper sounding voice? Do you want something a little bit more up? Do you want something a little bit more peppy? Is that what you're looking for? How about, and then you start to, the brightness, the timbre, all of these things that you as a voiceover artist know how to adjust technically. And you don't want to think technically initially. You just want to flow with a character and, be yourself. But if it comes to it, you need to be able to break that down. And I think when you put that back on the client and say, let's start making some decisions together, it actually takes the onus off you to figure out what they think that you think they mean, and you actually get to work it out together. So,
you also, like you said, you throw the ball in their court. As in, you're leading the session, you're asking them questions. Is that what you meant by more emotional? How can I tweak it to make it fit, into what you're looking for. And then they're forced to think, oh, okay, maybe the feedback of being more emotional wasn't specific enough to what we're looking for. Maybe, could you try something that's, could you add some sighs every now and then, like, and then that at least will build a conversation during the session rather than them just telling you the same feedback over and over and you not knowing where to go because you can't really decipher what's on their minds, right?
Exactly. You're so right. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. And I think that you've got to remember that we do this almost every day, at least a couple of times a week. We go into a session, we record a script. So for us, it is something that we do regularly. For many clients, they do maybe 1 or 2 campaigns a year. Yeah. So they may not be familiar with the best way to run a session. And that's not their fault. That's not their regular job. So I don't see it as a kind of us against them. I see it as you said, very much a conversation of how we can get the best out of this session. And it's really our job to guide the session and the sound engineers, but they tend to sort of keep quiet if they, if they don't need to interfere. I appreciate it when I'm allowed to, when I'm, given the opportunity to really run the conversation so that it can be between me and the client directly and we can get going. Yeah.
And does your experience as a film director improve or affect your career in your voiceover industry in a positive way?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I actually think it's the other way around. I think that because of my experience as a performer, I'm a better film director. But when I'm in the booth and I'm recording, I'm not thinking as a director at all. I think it's not my job to worry what the end result should be. It's my job to take the feedback and to give the delivery as per the director or the client's specifications, and then it's up to them to make sure that works as a whole finished product. Because I don't need to worry about the music that they've got on there, or whether they've got breaks for sound effects or all that kind of stuff. I just need to do my bit. So I think it actually works the other way around.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So when you're directing a film, how do you think in terms of voiceover elements to include in your film? What are the different steps or thoughts that go into your mind when you have a film or a project and you're trying to cast for the best voiceover actor?
Immediately, I know what I want in terms of the character of the voiceover. And then when I'm casting for that, I'm really looking for somebody who is closest to that naturally. You don't really want somebody that has to make a huge transformational shift. It's a little bit less, it's a bit more risky. And then I'm looking for somebody who can really kind of play and give me variations and isn't locked into one particular delivery style. So, whilst I said I want it to be closest to them so that they don't have to make too much of a jump, I also want them to be adaptable so that if changes and tweaks need to happen, that we can really play and, work off each other, bounce ideas off each other. And in fact, that's what has made some of the sessions that I've loved most as a voiceover artist work best, because me and the director have been able to, did you like that? I actually didn't like that one. Can we do another one like that? Can I offer you something like this? And that kind of back and forth is a real pleasure when you get those sort of sessions. It's a real pleasure. So I look for them on both sides of the equation. I look for them as a voiceover artist where I can really kind of offer suggestions and bounce ideas. And then when I'm in this session as a director, I look for somebody who is willing to take ownership of the character and offer suggestions as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it ends up being really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've recorded for so many brands throughout the years.
Yeah.
You were the voice of Eva from Emirates NBD.
I got so much hate for that.
How come?
Well, everybody hates having to, go through an IVR system and never getting through to a human being.
Sure.
And, people would literally post on social media, I wish Eva would die. And every time I went in for a recording session and I had prompts that said, sorry, I didn't get that. Can we try again? Let's try this a different way. I was like, oh my God, people are going to hate this because they just won't get through to a person. And I'm going to get them to repeat themselves and try a different way. And I know myself as, calling in, that's the last thing you want to do is go around in circles, try to figure out what the IVR wants you to say. So Yeah, I got a lot of bad karma, I think,
Wow.
being Eva. So, but Eva's no longer around. I think they discontinued her.
Oh, okay.
I stopped recording for Eva about 2 years ago now. So
2 years, okay.
my karma's improving.
Was it at BKP studio?
Yep.
Ah, awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. You were the voice of Eva for Emirates NBD.
Yep.
Do you remember a line from that script that you had to record?
The worst one is, sorry, I didn't get that. Let's try again. Because then when you're on the phone, it's like, I don't want to try again. Put me onto a person. Yep.
That's funny. Do you remember your first ever voiceover project?
I do. I was in London and I was booked to read an audiobook.
Awesome.
So that was my very, very first voiceover project ever. And it was a 5-day read of 6 hours a day.
Oh.
And I was sent the book ahead of time, and I had never been into a recording, into a booth before. And so, you know, I got all set up and they had an iPad for me and everything was really comfortable, and they had a biscuit tin so that if my stomach started rumbling, I could eat a biscuit to keep going, because we had, you know, so I don't know how many hundreds of pages to read. So that was sort of, you know, being thrown in at the deep end and figuring out how to keep focus for 6 hours, to keep your vocal health across 5 days. So that's 30 hours of recording. And, you know, to keep sane, you know, to keep reading the lines like you're actually reading them. Excuse me. To actually read the lines like they're fresh, like they're new, and not that you get into a sort of monotony. You know, audiobooks are a really interesting, you know, interesting way of working because they're really challenging. Yeah.
And how did you land that project? Was it through a union, or did you research studios by yourself and start sending your demos?
I can't remember exactly, but it was a book written by an Australian author. So in London at the time, I just finished drama school, and I think I was recommended through a friend that I was, you know, an Australian actor, so that I might, you know, be a good fit for the project. And the sound studio were really fantastic at making me feel very comfortable, and you know, the sound engineer had to be really focused as well, because you can imagine every time I say the wrong word, when you're reading hundreds and hundreds of pages, of course, you know, you start to say things incorrectly, or, you know, maybe not find the punctuation in the right spot and have to go back. And he was really great at giving me encouragement and saying, you know, you're doing a really great job, you know, I can't believe you've never done this before. And I don't know if that's true, but he was so great at making me feel comfortable, because you start to get a little crazy in a dark booth for that long. Yeah.
You can almost hear your own heartbeat through the mic and in your headphones, and you're like, whoa, this is weird. Like the first time, I remember my first time in a studio was kind of creepy. You know, being able to hear your own breath and mouth clicks.
Yep.
Definitely a rewarding experience, though, as you move in your career, as you improve and everything.
Exactly. And I have a sibilant S, so you can hear that it's really hissy.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. And you can really, really hear it in the microphone. You sort of have to learn to ignore that.
Yeah,
because that can easily be fixed in post.
Yeah, the Esser.
Yeah.
Isotope the Esser, everyone. We're probably going to use it on us for this episode.
For both of us, double whammy.
Can you tell us about the challenges that you faced throughout the years as you progressed in your voiceover career?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing to come to terms with is that there will be downtime. And when I say downtime, I mean, I've listened to podcasts and artists have complained that, you know, actors or people have complained that they've gone a whole month without work. And in my experience, a month is not that bad. You can get through a month without work. I'm talking about 3-4 months without a decent project. You might get a spit here and there. And you really have to be tough on yourself not to spiral into a sort of, I'll never work again panic. And should I, you know, change careers and do something else? And that threat is really real, because for some reason, there are certain phases, and they don't sort of come at the same time each year. You can't prepare for them. You don't know when to expect them. But there will be times when you might go for several weeks, or, you know, worst case scenario, you know, more than a month without work. And I think that as freelancers, we have to be so tough at, you know, kind of steeling ourselves against disappointment and being tough on ourselves, you know, when we don't book work regularly enough. I find that in both, a freelance director and a freelance voiceover artist. So you have to really be okay with rejection, and you have to be really willing to put yourself out there to pitch for every project that comes in with the same enthusiasm and the same confidence, regardless of whether you were shooting or recording last week or whether you haven't shot or recorded for a couple of months. I also, as I mentioned, I've got 2 young kids, so obviously I took time off when I had each of my kids. They're both under 2. So in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of time that I have not taken on projects. And you do sort of feel a bit rusty and you think, do I know how to do this anymore? You do. Of course you do. And it's up to each individual, and I say parent, not just mothers, but it's up to each individual parent to decide when they're ready to throw themselves back into work. And it takes a real kind of brain shift, gear change to function well in both environments, you know, because they are so completely at polar ends of the scale when it comes to how your brain functions, you know. So I've taken quite a bit of time off over the last 2 years, and I love getting back into work because it feels very refreshing after spending a lot of time at home, but I also love the freedom of saying, okay, you know what, I've been working really hard for a couple of weeks, I need to just take some time and focus back on my kids, and I'm just going to take the next week or 2 off. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You were talking earlier about, it's interesting because I've seen this develop throughout the years working in different studios. You mentioned about clients, you know, hearing your voice and approving your voice as their talent based on the delivery and the tone of your voice. Nowadays, and I know this as an audio producer, sending different voices to different clients, the clients seem to be a bit more picky in the sense that they're asking for custom auditions, even though they hear the different samples that you have. So for instance, I'd be sending a corporate read from Danielle, a radio spot from Danielle, an explainer video, etc. And they still want to hear a custom audition of their script. How do you handle all these audition requests, and how do you handle rejection?
I think that it's fair for clients to ask for sample reads because we can hear the difference in tone because this is what we do for a living, but it can be really tricky for a client to imagine the leap between your sample and their script specifically. So I don't have a problem with recording sample reads and sending them. It is just on my phone. There will be background noise. I mean, I'll try and get as clean a sound as I can, but I'm not going to go into my recording booth and, you know, my setup at home and do it properly until I'm booked. But I think that it is absolutely fair to do that. So I'm happy to send those out, and I think it gives me an opportunity to show them 2 or 3 different styles of delivery. So I often send more than one sample, so I can show them, look, if you're not exactly sold on any of these 3, you can tell that I can give you a bit of variation. So maybe we can get into the session and have a bit of a play.
Since COVID, we've seen a rise of remote recordings.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure you remember, we used to go to specific studios to record different projects. One day we'd be at Mango Jam, Soundstruck, you know, all the different studios. And since COVID, most people are recording from home. How have you adapted with this new system of work?
I have to say that for me personally, it's really tricky to record from home because it's really hard to find a quiet moment, and my house is not properly soundproofed. So whilst you're not getting echo and bounce around the room, I can't control whether there are birds outside that you can hear that really high-pitched tweet, 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 tweet coming through the window. You know, my toddler might wake up halfway through. You know, that's the reality for me. So I would love to get back in the car and drive over to the studio and just have the peace of mind of being in a proper booth and recording properly and only being able to focus on one thing. But obviously, it's such a huge convenience being able to record from home. And the great thing about a voiceover setup is that it doesn't have to be very expensive. I do have a more permanent setup that I spent a bit of money on to make sure that I've got the right sound. But when I travel, I actually take a Zoom recorder, and I've done plenty of spots on my little Zoom mic, and just made sure that I've got something soundproofed around me, pillows, a blanket if need be. I mean, it sounds really unglamorous, and it is, but if I'm traveling and I want to keep working, it's really easy to do that. So that's great.
Thank you for sharing your DIY tips and
Yeah,
tricks.
it's so embarrassing. I mean, you can imagine, you can really visualize me now under the blanket with a little pillow,
But it's awesome.
it does the job.
It does the job, and I mean, I've worked with you on so many different projects, and you've worked on many more with other studios. So I mean, I guess it's working.
It does the job, exactly. It does work. Yeah.
You've also recorded for Fisher-Price, Philadelphia, Jotun, a couple of McDonald's, I believe.
McDonald's, Clorox, Maybelline, lots of big brands in Dubai.
And how do you prepare for a voiceover session?
This is going to sound really cocky. I don't prepare anymore.
Okay.
I think once you've been doing it for a while, you're able to just kind of work with whatever you're given in the session. And also, scripts are not often locked until the moment that you step into the session, sometimes later.
Sure.
No. And do you know what? That's the beauty of the balance between being a director and being a voiceover artist, is that as a director, the preparation needs to be meticulous, and all you're doing is prepping for that shoot day. And it's such a pleasure when I get asked, I get booked for a voiceover spot to just rock up and get to play in the moment. So I don't, but I used to. I used to ask to get the script ahead of time and read the script. But you get really good at sight reading when you're doing it regularly. You get, you read the script once and then you're able to immediately jump in and give a read. I think most voiceover artists would say the same. You kind of get into a groove and it becomes quite easy. Yeah. Do you prepare for your voiceover?
I used to as well.
Yeah.
I used to as well. And not that I'm perfect now or anything.
No.
But it's like you said, throughout the years and having to record different projects, going from animation videos to corporate narrations to explainer videos to radio spots, they're all very different projects that require very different voice tones, delivery styles. It's like you said earlier, some want a deep and emotional voice, and other require a high energy delivery, to get whoever the end user is excited about the product. So I used to prepare for a session. Now I just like to come in and do a cold read, actually, because I feel like sometimes the first read you give might be the winning one.
I agree, yeah.
Depending on, of course, the client, depending on the agency. The more cooks you have, the more complicated it becomes.
Absolutely, yeah. But I think it's really freeing to have had this much experience behind you, and then to be able to walk into the room and do a cold read and see how it goes.
Yeah, just do your thing.
Yeah.
What are 3 traits, in your opinion, that make a great voiceover actor?
I'd say a sense of playfulness, good diction, and empathy.
Wow, empathy. Could you elaborate on these? So playfulness, good diction, and empathy.
Yeah, so playfulness, obviously you need to be willing to try something, think that it's amazing, the client doesn't like it, throw that out the window, start again. So there's this constant sense of, reinventing or rediscovering the character or rediscovering the purpose of the voice. Then for diction, it seems really obvious, but it's not. Not everybody does have the right diction to be a voiceover artist. And it's really irritating when you hear spots that are not recorded clearly. Because particularly here in Dubai, we have, so many people, English is their second, third, fourth language, and everybody's listening to English radio. So if they can't, if you're not speaking clearly, it's just not, it doesn't work. We're not recording for a small radio with people that all have the same accent listening to that radio. You know what I mean? So you need to be really clear. And the last one was empathy. Empathy, I think you just have to really, you have to think about who's going to listen to this and how they will hear it. You don't always get to, I think sometimes you get pushed into doing it in a different way than what you think is appropriate. But the idea is that you should be thinking about the listener, the end listener, and speaking to them. you know. Although the other day, actually, I went into a session, and it was, you know, those ones that are written as dialogue, like the one that we did for G. So, hey, honey, da 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 da.
Oh, great.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me more.
Exactly. So this was supposed to be, it was for a financial product. It was for a bank.
Okay.
And it was a husband and wife sitting on the couch, and he really wants to buy a certain, you know, electronic item. And it starts off with, you know, what's wrong, honey? And he goes, oh, I really want to buy this laptop, and, you know, I can't afford it. And then she says, oh, you know, don't worry, with Bank X, you can pay off your electronic purchase in 6 easy payments.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm thinking, okay, how do I make this sound, you know, normal, natural? And the client said, please, you know, it's just a woman and her husband sitting on the couch. Please make it as conversational and natural as possible. And I'm thinking, yeah, my husband and I sit on the couch every night, and I tell him, you know, don't worry, you can pay off your electronic purchase in 6 easy payments.
Exactly.
Totally natural script. So I tried to do as close as that as I possibly could. And the first round of feedback came back and was like, yeah, could she be a little bit more upbeat about it, a little bit more excited about it? So I was like, okay. Don't worry, honey. You need a little bit more of a smile. You can pay off your electronic purchase. And then the next round of feedback, and was like, okay. So the main selling point for us is the 6 easy payments. Can we really hear that 6 easy payments? So by the end, I'm giving the biggest hard sell delivery, you know, that I've ever done in my life. And sometimes I think, listeners don't buy this. Yeah. And I go, I mean, I'll do it because you've asked me to do it, but you know, have a little more discernment, you know, because listeners have a little more discernment about what's real and what's not. And I really doubt that anybody sits on the couch and says to their partner, don't worry, honey. You know, like,
could you please read the full line for us?
what did I say? It was, oh, honey, what's wrong? And I can't pay off my
really want to buy this laptop.
Yeah, and I can't afford it. Don't worry, honey. With Bank X, you can pay off your electronics purchase in 6 easy payments.
Wow. Very conversational.
I hate myself by the end of it. You know, I hate the sound of my voice by the end of it. But, you know, sometimes.
Very conversational.
Totally. Really natural. Yeah, absolutely.
With the rise of AI and, you know, technology advancing at an exponential rate, what do you think professional voiceover actors can do to continue to differentiate themselves from all the other AI voices?
I don't feel, maybe I'm naive, I don't think that AI is going to threaten any of our jobs. Precisely because of what we've just been discussing, which is a client doesn't yet know what they want specifically, or might not always know, and I think we're generalizing, I should take that back. May not know what they want specifically, may not know how to give that feedback. Some do, and some are amazing. But the job that we have is to interpret the feedback and offer a human response to that. And I think if all you do is think, I want an upbeat delivery, and then you put that into AI and you get an upbeat delivery, there's no room for spontaneity, there's no room to discover something that feels, you know, really true and really real. And that's something that we do as humans, right? And sometimes, I'm sure that you've had this experience too, it'll be the read that you least expect that is actually the one that works best.
That's true.
So, you know, they'll go, oh, look, this probably won't work, but just as a throwaway read, do it really, really nonchalant, you know, really just throw it away. And then we're like, oh, that actually felt really right, you know? Or vice versa. Often it's just as an, you know, give us a really, really over the top read, and they're like, oh, we love it. You know, like, okay. And I don't think that you can have that discussion, that conversation with AI. You know.
And how do you maintain your vocal health or longevity, and make sure that you're ready for future sessions without putting too much strain on yourself?
I'm unlucky that as soon as I get tired, my voice is the first thing that will show signs of cracking. Yeah.
Wow.
So I have to make sure that I am getting enough sleep, and, you know, obviously not having too much dairy products before I go in. So, you know, so you're not trying to clear your throat throughout the session. But I think apart from that, Yeah.
An active listener.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I want to acknowledge you for all the work that you've done and all the work that we've done together as well. It's been a pleasure throughout the years, and I'm sure we have so many more projects to come. So thank you so much for sharing your insights and your experience with us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. It's been a really, really pleasurable experience having a chat today. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.